Hi, and welcome to the Route to CISO Podcast. It's me, Chris Rides. I'm going to be your host, and I'm going to be chatting to seasoned Chief Information Security Officers about their career journeys. We're going to be unencrypting their real-life stories and searching for the hidden keys to help you fast-track your cybersecurity career. Welcome back to the Route to CISO Podcast. This is part 2 with Kim Jones. Let's dive right in. Anyway, back to it's not about my anecdotes. It's about me hearing about your career. And I want to jump on something that you said, just because recently this year, and in fact, the year even I saw you at InfoSec, well, past 3 years, we've done this talk with, we had 4 people that were all quite new to the industry. And the first one was they were in their very first cybersecurity job. And gradually, as we've worked up, their careers have changed because it's now 3 years on. Fingers crossed we'll be back there doing another update and another panel next year on that. But one of the things that formed a large part of this panel was a lot of them had quite big career moves, and most of them had experience working in consulting and really, really valued what they'd seen, the diversity, and how they felt that it kind of shot them like a rocket further into their career than maybe they may have got to. And it sounds like you kind of alluded a little bit to that as well.
Yeah, consulting. Yeah, I liken consulting the way I liken it to the military. What I used to tell people in the military is you get out what you put in. And, you can get out of the military 4 years older with no more money, et cetera, or you can get out of it with a trade, a skill, a degree, different things, et cetera, if you put in that effort. It's the same thing with consulting. Consulting gives you the opportunity to do a lot of things. One, it gives you the opportunity to see a lot of different industry verticals, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different sized organizations within the environment, a lot of different leadership and management styles. And here's a hint: leadership and management are 2 different things. I know you know this, but to your listeners. And understand what you like and don't like in a way that says, okay, this is what I'm looking for or what I'm not looking for, if you're given the opportunity to actually go and look and transition in-house, etc. The other thing is it forces you to do things like, how do I put this? We have a hard time talking to non-technologists. We have a lot of time understanding the business. We have a hard time in terms of expressing our ideas in a way that is not rude or condescending. Technologists do in general. Cyber technologists bring it up to the nth degree. Consulting done right at appropriate levels. I mean, you can individual contributing consulting and be on your keyboard and do that. But consulting, particularly customer-facing consulting, that dog just ain't going to hunt. And you can hone those skills, sharpen those skills, develop those skills should you wish to do so. And they will not only make you better consultants, they will make you better leaders and better cyber professionals overall. What's that old joke? Not old joke, that old saying for incident response? I don't want the guy who is the 100% best technologist in the company and can't communicate his way out of a paper bag. I need the guy who's the 80% best technologist in the company and knows how to communicate, because I need communicators within crisis management and incident response. Copy-paste consulting.
Yep. Yeah, it's similar to how we've got the penetration testing arm of Tyro Security. It's similar when we look at that, right? I know some of the best pen testers in the world that could break into things that most people would find impossible, but they're not a great pen tester if they can't write a report and describe what they've done, how they've done it, and how it needs to be fixed, right?
Yeah, I anecdotally call folks like that pizza boys, and I shout out to listeners. There are pizza girls out there as well, or pizza men and women, if I'm not trying to demean anyone.
Yeah.
And those are you lock them into the room, you shove pizza under the door, they will solve any technical problem you give them, but please God, do not let them talk to anyone, particularly somebody of the opposite gender. They will vapor lock and it will destroy them, and they can't. Now, there are roles for folks like that in different organizations, but that communication skill or that lack of communication skill can be limiting, and usually is. So, Food for thought. That's things that you ignored as you started hacking and geeking, etc. This is to your listeners, obviously. Those are the things that even as you grow as an individual contributor, you will have to have at some level.
Yeah.
So be aware.
It's kind of, well, you're kind of talking a little bit about really, we have a lot of neurodiverse people in our industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And many are extremely successful. I will also say, actually, from a recruiting point of view, if you're somebody that's hiring and you can find a great neurodiverse person that fits the right role and has the skills in areas that you want, they're a great person to hire.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the challenge that I run into, and as someone who has advocated for neurodiverse individuals within the hiring schema and started looking at that in my last role at Intuit before I went independent, the challenge that I run into is working with my human resources folks to say let me step it back. There used to be a challenge of if this person doesn't want to go into a management role, they're going to top out at certain salaries. Most tech companies, particularly those looking at cyber, have equalized that to say, okay, I don't have to be a CISO and I can still make good money, not on that track.
Yep.
That's great. Most companies have failed to do that with their neurodivergent team and understand that they're never going to be able to do certain of these things depending upon the nature of their divergence.
Yep.
How do I take advantage of those skills that they have and can do better than a lot of other folks in a way that and reward them accordingly for that in a way that's not limiting to their independence, their financial situation, etc. That's hard. There are a lot of companies that I found in my last gig, which was focused on talent, that are saying, yep, we need to do that. Great. How? Crickets. So I agree with you.
Yep.
My comments regarding communication are in no way meant to be disparaging to the neurodiverse community that's out there. We collectively as an industry need to figure out that piece for those who fall into that category.
Totally. No, I agree with you, Kim. And I know you well enough to know that you didn't mean it in that way, and that you're a supporter of bringing more divergence into our industry.
God, yes.
But what I was going to mention is the things that I've seen is, like, for many of them, once they find their home, and as you say, you treat them right, much like most employees, right? But specifically neurodivergent, most of the people I know that are neurodiverse, they hate the interview process. They hate them moving jobs. You've probably got a much more loyal following there that, make sure that you're doing the right thing by them, and you're not going to be looking to replace them every 2 years like you are in much of the employees that you look at.
Amen. No lie.
Yeah. So, no, that's good. Now, I think it's an interesting thing I want to sort of approach, because I talk about taking backwards and sideways steps in careers and how that can sometimes look from people on the outside, or even how you feel about it internally. Is that something that you've had to do?
Yeah, it's actually something that I did. It was a family choice. The companies I was CISO for were either turnarounds or in crisis. So I went to a financial services company, did the turnaround. They sold the company. I made no money. As my job went away, I went to another company, and actually this was the first business process outsourcing call center company that was PCI certified worldwide, because we had a customer for which we had to do it. So I was brought in to take this global company through not just compliance but certification and face off with the PCI Council, because version 2 of PCI really did not accommodate some of the things that call centers needed. So did that, sold the company. They made no money. I made no money. So seeing a trend.
Somebody did, though, I bet.
So somebody did. Yeah, I was not in the money on that one. I said, maybe it's time to go to a larger organization and take a slower path. There were no gigs for CISOs in the Valley at the time. There were plenty of gigs out of the Valley. About this time, my son was becoming a freshman in high school. And as a father, I did not want to be a commuter parent for my kid.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the info risk manager and deputy CISO role at one of the arms of General Dynamics based here in Arizona. I knew it was going to be a slower role. And I mean, I'm talking years, if any. And I knew that taking that step could possibly be career limiting should I wish to take the CISO role again. And in point of fact, it was. When my kid, through a series of events, I'd been there 3.5 years. When my kid, an incident happened at GD where it became abundantly clear to me that I was mentally, I was not being recognized for the experience that I brought.
Mm-hmm.
As in, they were going to poll folks externally regarding a particular issue. And those external folks were saying, why are you asking us this? When we have this question, we talk to Kim. Doesn't he work for you?
Right.
And this was about the time my kid was getting ready to go off to college. And I was like, I can stay here. There's no reason to leave. There's no path forward. And I started looking for CISO gigs. And because I did not have the title, I was not being considered. And I will tell you, it was another cleanup action that I was asked to take by my former boss, now the venture capitalist, Clyde, who came in and said, we're about to buy a company in Ohio. We're letting go the CISO. I'm hiring a chief operating officer. I'm pulling security out from IT, and I want you to take the role. And I said, well, here are the 5 reasons you don't want me to take the role, not the least of which it's in Ohio and I live in Arizona.
Right.
But, I've always trusted Clyde. I still trust Clyde. He asked me to interview, and I took the gig and had fun doing that. And of course, what I really found, Chris, which was very telling at the time, 1, 2, 3, it was 4. 4 companies that I had interviewed or actually thrown my resume in for the gig, one of whom the recruiter basically told me I was not qualified to take. Not basically, did. Within the space of the press announcement coming out 2 weeks later, all 4 companies asked me would I consider working for them, to include the recruiter who told me I was not qualified to take the gig he was recruiting for.
Yeah.
So that was a case where it was taking that sidestep off of the path, made things more difficult. And I will tell you now, that's a lot of what I'm seeing in the market right now.
Yeah.
I throw my resume out every 2 or 3 years to see what's going on. And every now and again, someone will approach me and say, hey, there's a CISO gig open. So, okay, yeah, sure. I'll take a look. Oh, no, they want someone who's currently a CISO. We don't want to grow anyone. We don't want to take anyone who's no longer in the role. We want to steal somebody. And then we wonder why our industry is having problems. But, what do I know? I'm just an old guy.
It's a strange old market at the moment out there. There's I believe there are some very strange ghost jobs out there, especially at CISO level, where I think there's people that feel like they need to hire CISOs, and but for some reason they're not actually doing it when there are some great people available. And they're also telling me they don't need help doing it, and yet these jobs sit open for a long time. So it's
it's
a strange situation.
It's not ghost job in that they don't want the person hired. It's ghost job in that the people actually going for the hire, or the people that they are answering to, don't understand the gig, the qualifications, and the only thing they know is let's grab someone who's not just done it before but is doing it now. And the industry can't sustain that way.
Yeah.
The profession can't sustain that way, and we're seeing that around the edges. And it's going to get worse when guys like John Stewart, who have stepped away from the chair, or Brett Arsenault, who stepped away from the chair, or Jim Routh, who has stepped away from the chair, or me, who has stepped away from the chair, just say, I don't want to play anymore. There are other things we can do. What are you going to do when that first generation of CISO says, I'm done? And now the market of qualified people has now shrunk by 10 to 20%, as those of us who are approaching 60 say, yeah, I don't need that noise
Yeah.
anymore.
Nope.
And it's happening. I'm
Yeah.
seeing it happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been talking about it for a long time now about, when you've got CISOs and they're paid very well and they don't need to work anymore, at some point, if they're not enjoying the job, they're not going to work. Why would they put themselves through it? Right.
And then you add the additional potential legal overhead that now exists. I've got opinions on that one way or the other, but you add that overhead and you've got fewer people who now say, I don't have to do that job in order to make money. So IT comes back and says, since we have to worry about security more, we'll just put them under the CIO. My answer is, that's great. Does that mean the CIO is the one who's going to go to jail when something happens? Oh, no, we don't want the legal liability. We want this downplayed manager or director here who you haven't given the title and aren't paying to do this to keep the liability. Well, that's really a lot of incentive, isn't it?
Yep.
It's going to come to a head and it's going to get nasty.
Yeah, it's always it already seems to be getting messy. Now, on the conversation with CISOs, like, what CISOs do you think that are out there doing a great job right now? Who are the ones, or even the ones that have like pieced out? Who are the ones that you most respect?
So I've mentioned a lot of those in the up to now, but the list is long. So, Jim Ralph did great work at Mass Mutual. I met him when he was in Amex. John Stewart, who has gone off into the supporting companies and angel investing role, was absolutely phenomenal. Stash Iraqi, a dear friend of mine who has retired finally. Stash is like, look, you're old enough to be my dad. It's time to stop. I do not want you to have yet another heart attack. Love you, brother, but please don't. Marnie Wilking, who is doing great work over at Booking.com overseas, is absolutely phenomenal. There are dozens that I'm neglecting to mention
I'm sure.
top of head, but
we'll say everybody else that thinks that you should have mentioned them, you can count them as mentioned, right?
Please do. Yeah, please do. Bad CISOs, bluntly, don't stay CISOs for long. They just don't survive. There are a few out there who I believe are. There are a few out there who I will not name, who are surviving through corporate nepotism, for lack of a better term,
right,
or through personal nepotism, and that's okay. But they are few and far between.
Right, so. I got you. What do you think? Especially when you even think about some of those people you mentioned, like, what do you think I always ask about the top 3 attributes of a CISO. What do you think, if you could pick 3, what do you think the 3 most important ones that a good successful CISO will have? And the ones that other people should work on, right?
The first thing I would say is you're a forever learner, right? There's an argument, and I make the argument regularly, because a lot of these young Turks coming up want to tell me how the sky is falling because life is different. And I say, is the internet still based on the same set of RFCs it was when I was your age? Yes. Then this is a different flavor of the same challenge. There are significant differences, but I need to learn those things, but the sky is not falling. The second one, and these are just top of head order, not in priority, critical thinking. I used to tell people that, making lemonade out of lemons is easy. The job of any good CISO is, how do you make lemonade out of 2 apples, a grapefruit, and a kumquat and make it look easy? So the way to do that, from my perspective, is to have a high level of critical thinking. And here's a hint. One of the things that influences critical thinking is a diversity of either experience or knowledge. And you could still be a great critical thinker at 20 if you have a diversity of knowledge. One of the habits I got into in high school, because my dad once said leaders are readers, is I read 15 minutes a day, every day, on a nonfiction topic that has nothing to do with cyber. I read on history, I read on politics, I read on sociology, I read on psychology, because that diversity of knowledge can better inform and give me better reference to make better decisions out there within the environment. So you want to be a better critical thinker, and you either can't, don't want to, or don't choose to go to a university or get a degree, etc., then your library and or your Kindle library better be full of stuff other than comic books and science fiction. I use those because in addition to my nonfiction books, there's comic books and science fiction in my Kindle. So I'm picking on myself there. The last thing for me is, you could call it different things. The thing that comes to mind is empathy.
Yeah.
It's empathy. It's remembering people matter. It's remembering that the people that you run into every day you may disagree with, but are human beings going through their own issues. They're not trying to mess with you to see the vein in your head twitch, and they're worthy of your respect as a human being. So if I can bring that level of critical thinking, if I can bring that level of empathy, if I can do those things, then you can do great things within the environment. The technology, Chris, is the easy part. The tech does exactly what you tell it to do. The reason my profession exists is we tell technology to do a lot of dumb things. Okay, this is why I'll always be employed. But people matter, and people are the hard part. We have to create that level of empathy and understanding if we're going to go forward.
Yeah,
great CISOs have those three qualities in my mind. All the CISOs I mentioned on the positive side have those great qualities.
Good. Yeah, I agree with you. And they're all, I mean, in the list and the sort of, I have a top 10 that I've got from all of the different sort of CISOs giving me their opinions on it, and certainly they're ones that you see come up. I think a lot of people have said empathy actually, even though when I speak to other people outside the industry, they don't think that empathy is something that we talk about enough, but it has consistently come up in the people that I've spoken to, and I think absolutely it's important. And I think you also got to understand it's hard. It's very hard for anybody to be empathetic all the time, right? And I try my best, but sometimes I have to sort of set a reminder of, when I'm annoyed and something that's happening and like, hang on a second, you don't know what's going on in their life, right?
Yeah. I believe me, I'm no angel, and I've blown my stack more times than I care to think about, and had to say, damn it. I had to go back. I had to go back, hat in hand, realize that I had not been my best self, and come back to the problem with a different approach. Empathy does not mean perfection.
Yes.
Okay? And I remind myself that there are going to be times where I'm going to be less than perfect, but own it when you are. Own it when you are.
And sometimes it's empathetic to shoot from the hip and talk to people and have the hard conversations, right? Sometimes that's the thing that you need to do, and avoiding things or being overly empathetic,
Mm-hmm.
actually ends up with not being good for you and not being good for the other person, that you're speaking to as well. So I think you got to understand how that works and what is empathy, right?
Agree completely. And for those who are struggling with that concept, Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor, add it to your library. If you're not a big reader right now, at least start with her TED Talk. It's an absolute talks about, that level. I can't remember the term she uses, but there's a toxic level of, I'm going to call it toxic empathy. It's not that, but I care so much that I'm not willing to have the hard conversation and what it can do to an organization. So Radical Candor is a great book if you're struggling with how to be empathetic, yet understand that you still need to have those hard conversations.
Great. Good. Yeah, I might have to check that one out. Is that, how do you go about, because you mentioned sort of just trying to give yourself 15 minutes a day reading about a subject. How do you pick those subjects, and where do you go to get that bite-sized piece? Because I've had the danger of, for me, it will be like, right, I mean, I'm with my daughter, let's talk about something that's a bit more educational, factual, right? Okay, we live in Nevada. She likes snakes. So let's find out about, what snakes are venomous and what snakes aren't, and why you shouldn't pick up just any snake you see. And, so I start thinking, okay, we'll do a video. But the trouble is, once you start on the video thing, you find it very easy to suddenly be like looking at videos that have nothing to do with where you started, right? And you've lost an hour of your time. So like I like the idea of being a bit more book focused. She's 5, so she's only just learning to read.
There you go.
But I do like that this seems like a better way to do things.
There you go. I actually multi-hone with a lot of these. In terms of how I pick, it's truly happenstance, chance, and whatever the muse strikes. Sometimes when I'm listening to the radio, I'll hear a story online, like the book "Standing Your Ground" regarding the one of the officers of the Capitol Police with the January 6th attacks, and he wrote his story. So I'll pick that up. I heard a article on NPR regarding a book that was written regarding the physical, I think it's called Tubes, the physical tubes and pathways that all of the wire that the internet is based on run in, and finding them and where the nodes are and the physicality of the internet. So, I love that one. Occasionally I'll multi-hone between my Kindle and audio, because there are times where it's like, okay, I like this book enough that I'll, listen to it on the treadmill and then go back to read it as well. When I listen on the treadmill or go audio, I double my time and say, if I'm only doing audio today, it's not 15, it's 30, just to make sure that I'm being true to myself. But for me, whatever the muse strikes, I'll occasionally read an autobiography that crosses my path. Kindle is great in terms of when you read on certain topics, it will recommend other things for you. And it's like, ooh, that looks good. I'll just, read the sample and say, sold.
Yeah.
Someone will recommend something to me that they've read recently, and I'll grab that. I'm a huge fan of, from leadership standpoint, I read Simon Sinek and anything he's written. I also read John C. Maxwell and anything he's written. And those are just, they come out with a new book, I'll just devour it. So a lot of it is just recommendations, happenstance, and whatever the muse strikes.
I'm going to have to, I might have to add this question to every CISO I speak to, just to get one book recommendation from each one, and we'll end up with a CISO top 10 or something, maybe.
So if you want one book recommendation and just one, I can't, but I'll give you 2. And they're both by John C. Maxwell. His Laws of Leadership and Responsibilities of a Leader. It's the 21 Laws of Leadership and the 21 Characteristics of a Leader, I think is the other one. They're his early books. So I'm a snob about leadership books. I'm a snob because I went to a college that required 12 credit hours of leadership over 4 years. So it's like, yeah, I hear you. I understand you. Maxwell is a former pastor who interviewed lots of CEOs, et cetera, within the environment to talk about leadership. I got his books early in my civilian career. I devoured them. I always keep a copy on my shelves. And whenever I take over a CISO role, I give my leaders copies of those books. Because the law of the lid, and things of that nature, told anecdotally, these are books that you can read a chapter at a time. And once a quarter, I will grab each of those books, open a random chapter, and just read it to refresh myself on what I ought to be doing as a leader. Those 2 books in my mind should be on every leader's shelf, period. So
good stuff. There you go. I'm 2 books in now.
You're 2 books in.
Well, look, I've got just a few final questions for you. We'll start off with, and like I get asked this a lot, and so I love that I get to ask you and other CISOs this same question.
Yeah.
But once you get to that CISO level, you've done a lot of hiring over the years, and one of the key things that a lot of candidates talk to me about, even up to CISO level, is like, okay, well, what's my resume got to look like? What does a good resume look like? And I understand that for every hiring manager, there's some differences. And so for you personally, when you get a resume, what does a good resume look like? And I'm talking quite generically, because haven't got a specific role we're talking about here. But what are the things you're looking for when you open up your email, you physically get that piece of paper and you're looking at it?
I'm not going to be able to give you a useful answer. and I'm going to give you an answer. So
Okay.
let me explain why I'm not going to give you a useful answer. What I look for in the resume, one, because I do have done break fix work, I have rewritten the job descriptions in every security organization that I've been in. And a lot of that has to do with knowledge, skills, abilities, leveling. No, you don't need to have 2 years of experience in the CISSP because we all know that's impossible. And I have forced those job descriptions down the throats of my HR teams. So from a job description standpoint, one of the things I have prided myself on is the description that goes out is actually what I'm looking for.
Yep.
And actually what I'm looking for is reasonable for the market.
Good.
Period. So we got to get past. So what I'm looking for when I see the piece of paper is how much of what I am looking for is in your resume.
Right.
So that's why my answer is not useful, because there's no, excuse my language again, there's no bullshit around the job description.
Yeah.
Now, I'll give you a shot if it's not, I'm not looking for a purple unicorn, and none of my job descriptions are purple unicorns. But, I'm not looking for someone who sent me 30% of the requirements and is trying to upskill. Their resume is getting tossed. But you're 70 to 75% of the way there. Okay. Are the skills you're missing ones that I believe I can teach, I can live without initially within the environment? That can be very subjective as a starting point.
Yeah.
But if you haven't hit at least 75% of what I'm looking for in my job description because my job description is accurate, I'm probably not going to look at your resume. Now, after I've looked at your resume, the HR person gets to say, okay, these are the ones I want screened. Okay, now that you screen these individuals down to verify based upon what you have been able to ascertain, and in many cases I go with HR and say, these are the type of questions I want asked. And as I educate some of my HR folks to say, that statement means they're tap dancing around the answer. And what they're doing is they're stretching. There's a meme. As you know, I'm a role play gamer. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for 35 years. There's a couple of memes that go around that say how to put your Dungeons and Dragons experience in your resume in terms of teaming, etc. I call that, this is the D&D entry in the resume. It's like, okay, this is, they're BSing within the resume, screen those folks out. When I get to a cadre of, okay, these are good people, the resumes are solid, the skills at least at an higher level look to be what I need to be, I do the first screening, not the last screening on the team.
Nice.
Because my team, the biggest part for me is not just that you have the skill sets and capabilities, and I've got engineers who will do that. I need to understand, can you fit in the team? If you're not going to be a fit in the team, I don't need a thoroughbred. I need a hardworking Clydesdale that can pull as part of a team. And my interview tends to be more regarding personality, work ethic, approach to leadership and management if they're taking that role. I believe everyone has a right to want their careers to grow. But I'm hiring you to do this gig. The way you make your career grow is do a freaking good job at what I'm hiring you for. If you're already focused on being my successor and you're 3 levels down, then are you really in the right mental state to actually do the good job? And are you going to be a good team member as well as colleague? Or are you going to be looking to be a careerist and step on the people around you? Those people do not get hired for me. Mm-hmm. And I start asking questions. The thing I used to tell people as the last job question I would ask, or tell me what you did here and what's your approach to this. If you're in a leadership role, describe your leadership and management styles to me. Here's a hint. If you tell me they're not different, you don't get the gig because there are a difference between the two. Yeah. The last thing I tell people is like, okay, tell me a story. Any story you want. Tell me a story. Can you, and I really don't care what the story is, but are you comfortable just stepping away from the problem now and responding without ego as to what that story is that you want to tell? I don't care if you make me laugh. I don't care if it's serious. Just tell me a story. It can be about what Chris, it can be about what your daughter did regarding snakes and what to pick up snakes. Okay, that tells me you're a very family-focused individual who not only cares about the safety of your kid, but about educating her appropriately versus restricting her from being out there.
Right.
That's just with that little anecdote. That's someone's like, okay, safety is important, wants people to learn, is willing to educate. Those okay, you're probably going to get to interview my team, okay,
Right.
or my team's going to get to interview you. I
Yeah.
love me stories tend to be okay. It tends to be a little egotistical.
Yeah.
Probably not the guy I want or the gal I want. So we'll see.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
I'm a bit of an odd duck, but for me, I want to interview about those pieces because those are how you build good teams. And I used to tell people when I was interviewing for CISO roles, it's like, look, I've made a career knowing exactly two things. I build teams and I take responsibility. I don't know how to do anything else. And I've been doing that since I've been pushing troops. So if that works and that's what you want, I'm your guy. If you want someone else, then cancel Christmas. I'm not the guy. But if you need someone to do the job and you let me build the team and take responsibility, I'll make it happen for you.
Yeah, and you've not been scared to take those jobs that other people have jumped into and then jumped out rather quickly, right?
My wife knows that I'm somewhat psychotic, so yeah. Yeah, I have fun, or I did when I was younger. Right now, the thought of doing that again is like I could, but damn, I'm almost 60 and I'm getting old.
What are you up to at the moment? We didn't really talk about that. Normally I lead with that,
Oh,
but
I
yeah.
went independent in September, and I decided that my focus is going to be more on teaching, training, and evangelizing. So I do a very little bit of fractional CISO work, and but I teach for SANS
Mm-hmm.
usually 6 times a year. I'm a lecturer in the UC Berkeley Master's Program. I do some CISO retainer work for companies, a la lawyers. Here's a block of hours. You use me as you need to within the environment. What else am I doing? I've built what I call the Jenga pile of stuff. So let's see. We've got Berkeley. We've got SANS. I've got some fractional CISO work.
Podcasts.
Yeah, I've got podcasts. Yeah, I've got some other stuff coming up that I can't talk about for another couple of weeks. So if that finalizes, the deal has finalized. The press releases aren't out. If the press releases go out beforehand, I will let you know, and you can tack it on later if you wish. But
Yeah. Well, you let me know anyway. I'm always interested to hear what you're up to.
yeah, so I'll tell you what. I'm assuming you're going to edit this tape.
Maybe, well, as it's been so far, I don't think it's going to need much editing. So you could save it
Okay.
why don't you save it till afterwards?
I will save it to afterwards.
Once I press stop on the recording, you can give me a little
I
bit more
prefer
of a
that.
lowdown.
I prefer that. But hopefully, yeah, I got some other good stuff that's coming up that I'm really excited about, but I got to wait for the releases before that happens.
I understand.
But yeah, it's good stuff.
So we'll say to the audience, just watch this space. We know it's going to be some interesting stuff.
You got it. You got it.
Well, so I've only got one last question to you for you, and I kind of ask everybody this, and I always find the answers super interesting, and that's if you could go back to your early career self and give yourself one bit of advice, knowing what you know now, what would that one piece of advice be?
Breathe. We have a tendency collectively, and it's so funny. My dear friend, I think you know her, Chris Tanaka.
Yes, yeah.
Yes,
Hey,
my
Chris.
dear friend Chris. I will tell you a story. I was in the CISO Executive Forum for ISSA when she had just come on there. And we were running around. We had met in Boston. Someone came up to introduce her to me. I took one look, and mentally I said, "Oh my God, that woman is stressed." I took one look at her, pointed to her, and said, "Breathe." And just saw her exhale, and we have been fast friends for almost 15, 20 years since then. That is the piece of advice that I would have given myself. I like to run hard, but I run myopically hard at whatever I do, and that balance has taken its toll. I I don't do burnout simply because of the way my dad had raised me. Given where he came up with, and given as a child of the late '60s and '70s, and in America, it's like nobody's going to give you anything. There's no use whining. Figure out how you're going to get through it and get it done. And my brother's the same way. So we just keep going and we keep going and we keep going. I had to teach myself how to stop. I had to teach myself how to build in time for fun and spontaneity and still get the work done. And I learned that I've been doing this from a military and civilian standpoint for 38 years. I learned that probably about 20 years in. I would have liked to have learned that earlier and exhaled earlier and enjoyed earlier. It's been a good life. I have no complaints. I woke up on the right side of the dirt. My paycheck didn't bounce. My wife says she loves me. My kid still talks to me. So I got no complaints. But I would have liked to have learned that earlier.
Yeah. No, that's good.
That'd be the only piece of advice I've given myself.
That's a great piece of advice. And I think one that everybody can learn from. It's hard when you're in the middle of something and just running and running. It's hard to remember to take that time to stop and take a breath, and that when everything seems probably most urgent, it's probably actually when you most likely need it. Hey, that's what the attackers rely on, right?
Exactly.
Put you under pressure, make sure that you know that there's a big time frame, you need to get stuff done, and it's the people that stop and take a look that notice, hang on, something's a bit strange going on here. So, Yeah, take that breath.
You got it.
Love the advice. Well, I can't wait to get off this because then I'm going to get the gossip.
You get the gossip.
Exactly. But thank you so much. I appreciate your time. It's been lovely chatting to you. And
it has been fun, an honor, and a privilege. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Route to CISO podcast. If there's something you really want me to ask on the next episode, or if you're a CISO who wants to inspire the next generation, please reach out. I'll leave a URL to my LinkedIn profile and make sure you connect and message me there. We're always looking for feedback, so please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.